All right. So going to continue with more insights, and it kind of ties into the last few videos as well. Now, one thing before I go into that, that I wanted to emphasize, because I'm not sure I made it entirely clear in the last video, is basically like with a lot of these influencer type of things, or, overblown characters online, let's put it that way, especially the ones that have the amount of pushed up fake numbers behind their profiles. With a lot of them, all you're seeing is just a fake home, fake backgrounds, and fake moms, like pretty much everything, So when they take pictures, let's just say they take a picture for a reel or whatever, like in front of a home, and then the way I saw it, the moment they step away, like that entire background is completely empty. There's nothing there. There's like no soul in that home, in that place that they filmed in, because it's not actually theirs. And even if it is theirs, it's really not what they're like. In some instances, it's not what they're portraying it to be. And so I was following this one person, just as an example, to highlight what I mean. I was following this one person. She was portraying herself as a single mom online and so successful and everything. And then before I psychically read on her, like a few days before, I actually had, because I was following her for some of the advice she was giving, but I had this dream. And in this dream, it's just so strange, because I get a lot of psychic insight through dreams as well. I think it has to do with having certain aspects in my astrology chart too. So some people get a lot of insight through dreams, some people don't. But in this particular dream, we were in a cafeteria like setting with a whole bunch of other people, and you can interpret that as, her like online Instagram community, or just like an online community, but we were in this open area, hundreds of people in it, cafeteria like setting, similar to, when you go to school, high school or whatever, there's this huge cafeteria. And her child, her toddler kid, was around, but she was not taking care of her kid, meaning her relatives were taking care of it, or her followers were taking turns taking care of it. And so the dream in and of itself already gave me a lot of understanding in terms of, okay, she's barely around her child in actual life. She might see her kids like a few times a day or once a day or so, but probably nannies take care of it, or other people are taking care of it, because she's so overworked. She's like literally working herself to death, trying to catch up with the image that she's portraying online, which is like this is successful person and yada yada. Oh no, you only have to work 2 hours a week to do the same thing, but it's actually not true. And so the dream already gave me a lot of understanding in terms of that. But then when I did a massive psychic read on a lot of these people, what I actually got was is that she's really not around her kid at all, and that everything she portrays is kind of like this fake reality. So like all the walls that she has in her reels and everything, all that, even though they have pictures and everything up, they're actually not real. They're just rented out, meaning she might like just batch record things like a few times a month or so, and then make it seem like this is her real home or something like that. Like very, it's a bit hard to explain the way I saw it, because it's just like these visions that you get. But anyhow, that's how some people do it. And so my point is not a lot about their lives as real. And then also, when they try to portray their real friends or whatever, those are usually fake friends, not the true friends. And usually those type of friends disappear when things get tough, or they can't use them anymore. And so this is basically the fake plastic world they want to portray to us. And it's quite interesting, because a lot of people are very influenced by that, especially if you are on social media. And I think especially the younger generation, the teenies or early 20s, or maybe even people my age, I don't know. But especially like the younger generation might be very influenceable by that, and might want something that doesn't really exist in real life. And then in order to pursue that, they're not really getting anywhere, obviously, because a lot of those tips, a lot of that advice has no substance to it. And so it's really iffy situation we're bringing, especially the younger generations in. But obviously everyone can be influenced by that, unless you're completely away from your screens. And so I do think the only way to really stay organic is to find a physical community, an actual community in person, and just to live in the real world again, the way it was 30, 40, 50 years ago and so on. But yeah, I mean, social media has ruined a lot, hasn't it? Okay, so a little bit more, some insight. My dog is biting her bone, so hopefully that doesn't come through in the microphone. Okay, yes, spiritual sites. So there's this huge power to spiritual sites. I was particularly trying to tap into the energy of Maui because that is that one island I have not yet been to, and I feel there's a reason to that because I've not yet felt energetically drawn to Maui. And Maui had a lot of stuff happen to it as well, you know, from that one August occurrence a few years ago in was it 2023? Yes, in 20 when Lahaina and everything was burning. Like there's been a lot of exploitation happening there for sure, a lot of greed, a lot of real estate taking over, a lot of this, a lot of that. Yes, of course, a lot of that was fabricated, but it's also just a way for the land to say enough is enough. They're revolting against that greed. And I feel similar actually happened around the Asheville, North Carolina area, because when I visited that area back in 2021, I did not like the energy at all. And I didn't like the energy because of the locals. The locals were actually fine. You know, the original North Carolinians who lived in that area were fine, but it was more like it was being overtaken by a lot of people from New York or a lot of richer people from who don't really belong to Asheville. Let's put it that way. And the real estate market was artificially hyped up as it is in a lot of areas. And so Asheville is not as spiritual of a site as Maui and all these other very native, Aboriginal, or like very native. Well, here it's Native American. You know, like those very, it's like tribes that are very attuned to nature. It's not that as spiritual, but it still holds a pretty strong spiritual component. However, very infiltrated. I'm not saying they deserve what happened to them. Absolutely not. But I do think the land has a say with all of that, in addition to, you know, the weather modification and everything else that's happening. So there's different factors that are playing into it. It's not just one side, oh, only this happened and that happened. Land is fully capable of protecting itself from fire, from these occurrences. When you treat your land, where your house or whatever you live in, you know, when you treat your land nicely and ask it for protection, it's fully capable of doing that. And you hear these stories. I know from at least one person that I knew, and she was more in the Carolinas, but you hear these stories of where they were just asking their land to protect them. And then the tree actually fell elsewhere in a different direction, not on their house, but elsewhere. So nothing was really harmed, just as an example. So there are ways that land can work with you if you treat it well, however, not if you exploit it. And so if there's such an exploitation happening as it is in a lot of areas in the world, not just here in the US, but also in a lot of other areas, the land does have a little bit of a say in that, and especially when you deal with such a highly spiritual site, such as in Maui and all of those other areas. So I don't think Asheville is as spiritual as that site, you know, having been there before. But still, there was a power to that land for sure. They also had a lot of crystal mines around the Asheville area, around the entire Blue Ridge Mountain thing, because I visited quite a few crystal stores when I was there. There goes my OneNote. And so there was quite, yeah, some power to that land. You know, when you have crystal energy working with it, there's always a lot of power. All right, so there's something about Greek history as well that, you know, other tribes want to take over. They just want to take it over and over again in history, especially like the Turks and the Greeks. You know, that's a huge one. And with the Greek gods, I don't think they're as ancient as other tales or as other things that came. Like, I think the Greek gods happened after a more recent reset. And then the other tales, like for sure, the biblical tales are much older as the Greek gods, where it kind of happened around the similar time frame, depending on which script in the Bible you really go by. But the Greek gods do bring soul into the culture, especially with the offerings that they bear, and especially with music and everything else too. So one goddess that comes to mind in particular is Venus, which is the equivalent of Aphrodite. So different names to this, obviously. But okay, this is just going to be like all over the place. So I'm just trying to decipher my notes down here in addition to everything else that's going on. But that was one part that came through. The Garden of Eden. Where was the Garden of Eden? think one person commented a while ago saying, oh, all of those things actually happened in Africa and this and that. And, actually everything was black or African anyhow, like a black Jesus, a black this and that, whatever. No, I didn't get that. I got the Garden of Eden has nothing to do with Africa at all. I do think it was definitely closer to where they say it was, which is Iraq, like what used to be Mesopotamia. But there were other things that happened in Africa that are just inverted at this point. We're not getting the full story unless you really are very attuned to the African land because you have some sort of African lineage or some sort of interest in that land. But the Garden of Eden was actually not in Africa, whatever is being said about it, which part of Africa, I don't even know. However, there were other things in Africa for sure. So I'm not sure those are actually things mentioned in the Bible, except for if you go to like Egypt, what's Sudan now, like ancient Egypt, that's pretty much where Sudan is right now, not where the Egypt is that you can visit and where they have all the fake pyramids. But if you go like more to the northern part, okay, yes, those are for sure still a few of the biblical sites. But the other things, you're talking about, I don't know, what, Nigeria, Benin, Namibia, like that, there's just a different story and background to it. And it might be cool just to tap into that. I don't know, maybe do that in the future. Okay, my dog is doing something else. Hold on. Okay. Having a dog is like having a kid sometimes. Okay, sticking with that same theme of land and biblical tales. So Apostle Paul is not the same. Someone commented being like, he's just was he a scammer? What did they say? He's some sort of shill or whatever. Like he didn't really exist in the way they say it is. No, I do think he did, but he went through his own suffering, which was very different from the real Joshua. So they're trying to intermesh these stories of Apostle Paul and Jesus and Joshua, whatever, very different from each other, very different stories, very different pains of suffering. But whatever, like most of what they say that happened to him, especially the torturing, everything that did happen to him. So these people just went through different types of suffering. So also like Barnabas and other people who were with him. And so people who would be more attuned to his tribe, his community, would be more interested in that story. I'm in particularly not that interested in Apostle Paul. Like I think everything, there's just these different layers that came about. And then also certain parts in this world just feel very lifeless and a bit taken over by AI. And that usually has to do with the indigenous community that's under attack. So an example of that would be parts of Australia, which is also what I noticed when I was there for half a year in 2019, like right before 2020. Can't even imagine what it feels like right now, but back then it definitely already felt very taken over. They say it was the Chinese, like the real estate market's taken over by the Chinese and everything. And now they're saying, was it my one friend sent me this article that India's trying to take over and this and that, whatever. I don't really know who exactly is taking that over. I think it's just the same groups and different faces to the groups. But just this entire thing that the indigenous community, especially in Australia, is under a huge, massive attack. And which part are they in? They're like in this really like center part that gets a really bad reputation. And it's supposedly really, really dangerous to visit and everything. And that has to do just with the disconnect, the indigenous community just being very disconnected from their own origins, their own spirituality and all of that. And so that's what happens when there's this disconnect that happens. And that's the same also what happens with the Arabic culture too. So that's what I got on Australia in particular, because I was really curious about, why it wasn't possible for me to stay for that much longer. And I don't think it had to do just with 2020, but it literally just felt a bit out of tune and imbalance, at least the places where I was at. Now, I'm not saying if you're from Australia or you live there or you like it, that you're imbalanced or like out of tune with nature or whatever, but it's just everyone has a different path, right? And for me in particular, it just wasn't my path. And I'm slowly and surely come to terms with that as well. Now I'm going to go into the Arabic culture real quick because that does seem to be coming up. Okay, Arabic culture came first. The Arabic culture in and of itself is actually pretty warm, pretty welcoming. And then Islam came. And when there's a disconnect from spirit, that's when atrocities are committed. So it's not the religion in and of itself that does all these things to their own women. You know, if you go to countries like Iran, Saudi Arabia, all of this, what I already got on that is Saudi Arabia and Iran, those two countries in particular, do not respect women for whatever reason. I don't know what exactly is in their history. And this comes from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago. But it's not the religion in and of itself that is horrendous, or that's just, oh my gosh, Islam is the worst, whatever. No, it's just when there's a disconnect from people and their own spirituality, that's when those bad things happen. It doesn't even matter which religion you're a part of. You know, a lot of bad things are reported on the Indian culture as well, because a lot of negative things towards women happen there too. But you don't see people, you know, bashing that anymore. Like 10 years ago, it was a different topic. But anyhow, the Arabic culture came first before the religion, and the Arabic culture in and of itself is very welcoming. And Iran in particular is just a huge melting pot of everything. Anyhow, it's not really Arabic, you know, they have their own language and everything. So it's just a melting pot of a lot of different DNAs, a lot of different tribes, a lot of different everything's. With Turkey, though, you know, Turkey in particular, because people are also saying Turkey's trying to take over. If you look at Turkey trying to take over other European countries, or just being very present in those countries, Germany is one of those. I'm not sure the takeover has much to do with Islam either, meaning the Sharia law or Sharia law or the culture, but there is something very strange going on with that in most recent years, over these past 10-ish years or so. And I feel that's why you can see how a lot of countries in the EU are changing too. So it's not just Turkey, it's also a few other nations. But, you know, when people send me these videos of huge demonstrations where you see a certain type of demographic being represented, you know, they want to say, oh, the Muslims are doing this thing and showing how much they're in power and control in Germany. It's not, there's something very strange going on. That didn't happen when I grew up there. That's correct. And I still can't really speak on that because I'm not there right now. And every time I talk to one of my German friends, I get different versions of what's really going on. Some of them don't live in cities. Some of them still live in a more rural area. So that's a different viewpoint than when you're in Berlin or Hamburg or Munich. But I do strongly believe the energy has changed. The last time I was there was about 2 years ago. The energy has changed somehow, but it's changed everywhere, you know, so it's very hard to really tap into that unless I'm there for a longer time, and you're not really getting much by hearsay from other people. So yes, there does seem to be something going on to that effect, but I'm not sure it's like a religious takeover or something else. You know, it could be very much something else too, like more culturally speaking. Okay, so trying to talk about concepts that, oh yes, right. Okay, Neptunian lines, astrocartography. All right, so I was following this one astrology guy online. He was kind of, this is the thing about astrology. Like if you want to apply it to a situation, it can always be right or it can always be wrong, you know, like there's it's like it's just about the way you interpret it. But this guy in particular, the more I just kind of dug into him, this is again like another person who has a whole bunch of followers, like hundreds and thousands of followers. He does seem to have a little bit of knowledge because he's already in his 60s, but he looks like a clown. He's kind of flavorless. He puts on a show when he does his daily readings, or, you know, once every 2 days, energy check-ins too. It is entertaining, and he is sometimes featured on TV, on like British TV. He's a British guy. But a lot of these topics, like I already said in the last video, a lot of these topics just go deeper than people are willing to go, and none really go deep enough. So not just in astrology, but also many, many other topics. But what this guy in particular was talking about was Neptune, and how you have to always be careful of Neptune, and your Neptune would be the equivalent of Poseidon, but I think they're actually two different representations of things, but they're pretty similar. So Neptune always gets this bad rep. If you go, for example, with astrocartography, when you're on your Neptunian line, that's supposed to be the line of disillusionment and this and that, whatever. However, what I got on, like Neptune's actually pretty powerful and a beautiful energy, and you can make your dreams come true on that line too. So it's important just to see things from all angles. And the same with astrocartography, things just go way deeper than what a lot of people say. I myself actually had a reading with a person, and the reading absolutely did not resonate at all. And then I came across another person who seemed to know that it seemed like she knew what she was talking about more, because then she was talking about, oh, the parents' lines and this and that, whatever, which the other person didn't even consider. But I didn't have a reading with her whatsoever, because not everything she said resonated with me either. And so, there seems to be, what I really have to say about this entire topic, without knowing that much about it, but just by observing, by having like a handful of astrology readings in my life, and also one astrocartography reading, which I feel there is a power behind astrocartography. So astrocartography is basically when you have your birth chart, and then you analyze, like when you live somewhere, when you go somewhere, you analyze which line you're on and which would be a successful line or not a great line. For example, the Pluto line can be very triggering, like those type of things, the Saturn line, everything. But with a lot of these things, you have these younger, fresher faces pop up who've not studied it extensively enough. Even though they say in astrology after 2 years, okay, you're somewhat good to go. Now you can finally give readings to others. But you have these like new faces pop up all over who just don't have the extensive experience at all, and who want to give life-changing advice. And then they give you a reading, as I could already tell in my own personal life. And the reading like halfway resonates, but the other half doesn't at all, where there's such a discrepancy where you're just like, is this just all BS? Or are they just kind of abusing the trade? But that's how I personally feel about both things, like astrology and astrocartography. So if someone has an opinion on that, definitely let us know. But I just feel you really need to study it extensively, like decades and decades and decades, to really have an understanding of it. And at that point, you're already good and well retired. So it's complicated with those type of things. But it does appear to be, because it's just so extensive, that if you really want an accurate something, that's kind of what you need to do, right? If you at least want to do it in an intuitive way, or in a way that makes the most sense. Yeah, and then a lot of them are just pushing this entire glamour narrative of, oh yeah, and I live on my Venus line or this and that line, and my life is so great. But it's actually not true. You can still run into a lot of hurdles and whatever. So I feel just there's so much that goes into it. Let me check something here real quick. Okay, so still, yes, it's still the battle of your soul, or the battle for your soul, however you want to put that. Community is going to be incredibly important. And by community, it's mostly the actual physical community we surround ourselves with as well. So once again, there's a disconnect in our lives when we're only online, when we don't have real life friends and this and that. And I do understand that for some people it's very hard, depending on which stage in your life you are. But a physical community that's actually not toxic, but the opposite, is going to be your best bet, especially if you are facing challenges right now. Just some sort of support network, support system. And then just because we had that quite recently, Valentine's Day can be a very triggering day. It's very over commercialized. It can cause more harm than good, because all the expectations that are attached to it. And in addition to that, the mainstream wants to make it seem like, oh, how amazing, we're giving you a day for love, and now you can express your love and buy your love an expensive fancy gift, or a box of chocolates or roses, or have them go for dinner. And of course, dinner reservations are going to be out of the roof, like super expensive, because everyone has to do that, like especially over these past few decades. But basically they're trying to squeeze like all this love that we are fully capable of feeling towards another person, also towards ourselves. They're trying to squeeze it into this day and really squeeze us out, financially and emotionally, and just drain us. And a lot of conflict and harm is caused because there's so many expectations. You see it in commercials and ads and TVs and everything. We're like, oh, it's Valentine's Day. If my person doesn't give me something, they don't really love me. Or my person doesn't propose to me on Valentine's Day, Oh my gosh, that's like the latest hype, of course, proposing on days everyone else proposes, yay. Christmas is another one. But basically, that was sarcasm, by the way. I would never recommend anyone do it on any of those days. But basically, there's this huge portal of pain, hurt, and everything opened up during those days. Another one is Mother's Day too, can be a very triggering day. A mom doesn't really need to be reminded that she's a mom. I mean, it depends on the relationship a mom has to their kids. Like a mother-child relationship is going to be the most triggering relationship out there, any of the most karmic relationship, put it that way. Not a lot of people have an easy relationship to their main caregiver, which tends to be their mom or their father. And so I really do feel with all these days that they put up, like, oh, the Women's Celebration Day, celebrate the women's rights, but then ha ha ha, women still don't earn the same amount of pay that, it's just a lot of this is rubbish. But in addition to that, a lot of portals or pains are opened up by the collective because there are all these fake expectations attached to it. And sometimes they're just not met, right? Because people just have different understandings of love and express their love differently and all these things, that coming back to Valentine's Day. And so it actually does more harm than good. And Christmas is a huge one, like the Christmas pain, the Christmas wounds, because it dates all the way back to childhood and even past lives, and a whole bunch of stuff always gets released around at Christmas. So it's always better to stay away from people during that time, ironically, because that's the time some people want to be with their families. But yeah, I mean, it depends on your own situation, right? Things money can't buy: community. So once again, it's all about a healthy community. And there was one more thing. Oh, yes. Okay, here. Bulgaria, Romania have a strange culture because they treasure their kids, or especially their daughters. They can treat them like princesses. But then also, I think it was Bulgaria, one of those two countries, like one of those countries actually has a bridal slave market, meaning once your daughter turns 15 or so, they're brought to this market, and then money's exchanged, and this daughter goes to someone else. It's basically like a bridal slave market. Now this doesn't happen to every single family. It does appear to be more like a Roma descent or origin. Romas is like gypsies or whatever. So it almost seems like Middle Eastern Roma, but still, I mean, just the fact it happens in these countries, and then the culture in and of itself, it actually treasures their kids so much, but then it treats them that way. I found that a bit strange. But I haven't been to the Balkan yet, really, and I do want to visit and just see what it's like. Also Albania and all of those areas, because I find they used to be connected anyhow, right? Like the entire thing in the world was just one landmass, and then all these different cultures came, and yeah, just kind of, I don't want to say they fractured what was there before, but they just kind of restructured the culture that was there before. Okay, what else? Let me check here. Yeah, I think that was about it. I'm just trying to dig through all this material because it's like written on so many different pages. But basically, okay, people right now seem extremely depressed. When I talk about the battle for our souls, the battle of our souls, it's not just that, people are having really dark thoughts, but just in general, they're really pushing a lot of depressive things right now. It's not because it's winter in the majority of the world, but there's a lot going on. There's an actual astral war going on. But this might be worth emphasizing more in a deeper video on it. And yeah, and I think that's pretty much all I wanted to discuss so far. So we have something on the artificial soul trap that deserves a longer explanation. And getting to be here with other souls in life in whatever form that might be. So even if a soul, if you have a pet or whatever, you get to be, because obviously animals have souls, at least most of them, I would say they belong to their own soul group and everything. You get to do life with them. So there's a reason an animal chooses you, or a pet chooses you, or whatever enters your life. It doesn't just happen by coincidence. And people grouping together in soul groups also really important. So in whatever form that is, not just your family or like your actual blood related family, but however people find each other. Let's put it that way. All right. A lot of things online are devoid of soul. And we already discussed that in the last one. But yeah, I mean, it's clown world right now. Gonna leave it at that. Was a bit all over the place. Just wanted to finish these notes, and then we're gonna try to dive deeper into a few other topics in the future to come. And until then, I'll see you.